We only justify the things that we don't want to change. We never justify the things we can't actually change. It's sort of like when people rail real hard against something, your first thought about them is, well, there's something there that they're hiding. And I've done a lot of that in my lifetime, a lot of trying to justify things that I was trying to convince myself were an inevitable thing, that it was unchangeable, unmovable. But in reality, especially looking back, I can see it was just stuff that I didn't want to change. A really good example of that is in my 20s, whenever I was a musician, we had a little bit of national notoriety. People knew who we were, but we weren't quite good enough to get anybody to actually pay us money and sign our band to a label. But because of the position that we were in, I knew a lot of those guys. I was friends with those guys. We were in the same social circles. And because of that, I got to spend time with them. And I remember one specific incident where me and my then wife were at one of their houses. And they had a really nice big house. It was the kind of house that I had always dreamed of. At the time, we were living in a $300 a month apartment in this small town. So going over and visiting this person that was also a musician that was able to make that jump over to the next level, it gave me some insight, some vision of what it was that I was trying to attain. And I remember as we left there, driving away in the car, I got very adamant. I can still remember the way that I felt as I was talking about being a musician to my wife at the time. I was saying, this is why I do what I do. I don't have anything else. I remember very specifically saying that. I have nothing else. This is my one chance. And even at the time, whenever I was saying it with such a lack of conviction that I knew as the words were coming out of my mouth that it wasn't true what I was saying, that I was trying to convince something that was not. There's a saying that says, your opinion of the truth has no influence. It doesn't matter what you think, the truth is true. And so as I was driving away and getting on this soapbox about I have no other skills, this is what I was born to do, I remember thinking that's not true at all. And I'm lying to myself. But the funny thing about lying to yourself is you're never actually lying to yourself. You're actually lying to everybody around you. You're lying to the world. It's just starting with you. Nobody ever lies to themselves and then gets honest with the rest of the world. That's not how things work. So in that car, as I'm lying to myself and lying to her and lying to the world, I could see the cracks that I was creating on my own by trying to follow this false narrative that this is all I was meant to be. Several years later, the band was done. We were broke. We split up. I ended up getting into real estate. And at the time, I think I was 26 or 27 years old. And because of my background in the music thing, I wanted to be different. I wanted to be cool. Like, I kind of saw real estate as this old people's gig, and I wanted to come in and do something different. So I called myself the rock and realty guy, and I was the tattoo. It was a bit of a theme. It was a bit of a character that I was trying to play in order to be different. And because of that, I had pinned myself into a corner of, well, here's the type of agent that I'm going to be. This is who I'm going to work with. Young, first-time home buyers. That's like my thing because I'm cool and I want them to think I'm cool. And I remember being in my office one day and probably the oldest people I've ever seen in my life walked in the front door. A man and a woman. And they introduced themselves, and I don't remember his name, but I remember her name very well. Her name was Hazel. And they had seen one of my properties online. They wanted to go look at it. And I was the only one in the office. And frankly, I was broke. So I took them and showed them the house. And we looked at actually several houses together and formed a little bit of a relationship as far as client and agent. And at some point during that process, they came in and informed me they were not going to be looking anymore because Hazel was sick. And Hazel was the kind of sick that you don't treat in the U.S. She was the kind of sick that they were going to have to go to Mexico and go to this holistic a place down in Mexico. And as they were describing this, I thought, well, this sounds familiar. I think I actually know the place that they're talking about, because I had been into juicing, vegetable juicing for years. And there was a place down in Mexico called the Gerson Clinic, if I remember right. It's been several years. But at the time, I knew exactly what it was as they were explaining it to me. And they were shocked that I knew that I knew what juicing was, what this clinic was, what it was for. And so we spent some time talking about that, and then they invited me to their house. And whenever I was at their house, I talked more about juicing. We talked about how I had sort of come into juicing, and I shared recipes with them and how it had benefited me. And all of a sudden, I had made this transition from agent to client to almost like a peer or a person, which was not in my wheelhouse at the time. That's not what I was supposed to be doing. I was the rock and realty guy. I was supposed to be working with cool first-time home buyers because I'm hip and whatever else BS I was feeding to myself. So they left and went to Mexico. And they were supposed to be there, I think it was for a total of 3 months, maybe it was 4 months. Well, about a month later, the gentleman walked in to my office, and I have never seen him before without Hazel. So automatically, because I knew where they were going, and because he wasn't supposed to be there, I thought something may be wrong. Something might be amiss. And as he sat down at a table, much like this table here, right across from me, he began to cry and told me that Hazel had not made it, that as soon as she got there, she had taken a turn for the worse, and she did not make it through the treatment. And as I sat there with him weeping at losing somebody that he had been with for decades, there was a tremendous amount of weight on my shoulders, feeling grief for him, but also I couldn't help but also feel a little bit of grief for myself for having lied for so long to myself about who I thought that I was and what I thought that I was capable of being. And I remember very specifically in my head, much like in that car several years before, the things I was saying to myself became very clear. I could hear them crisply. And as I sat across from him, I could hear myself saying, "How dare you ever think that you know what you are capable of? How dare you think that you know what your potentially actually is?" And this next line was the most clear out of all of it. And it said, "You have no idea." And so after that, it was hard for me to ever get back to what I was before, the rock and realty guy, pigeonholing myself. I tried, and it was just never the same. And now as the years have gone by and I've gotten older, I've realized that none of it was true. That I was trying to live a life based off of how I perceived myself in the future, but I was doing a bad job of living with the life that I currently had now. And I don't know why I thought then that I would ever be able to achieve anything more when I wasn't even being a good steward of the one that I had actually been afforded, to the life that I was actually given and had an opportunity to do well. So what I wanted to tell you today was, don't lie to yourself. There is no such thing. If you're lying to yourself, you're lying to everybody around you and all of those people that you love. You have no idea what you're capable of, regardless of how hard you're trying to justify that to yourself. That thing which you are wanting so bad. Are you actually pigeonholing yourself into that? Is it actually true? Or is it just something that you want so bad that you're creating this narrative, you're creating this ecosystem around it so it feels like it has to be true? Because if that's the case, then there's actually a life outside of that you're probably robbing yourself of. There are opportunities outside of that you're probably never going to be able to achieve because you're so envisioned, you're so entrapped with this idea of, well, this is the one thing that I want. This is meant for me. This is what I'm supposed to do. Meanwhile, a world continues to evolve and grow around you and without you.